The ultimate evidence of the Holy Spirit in our lives is not signs, miracles, wonders, gifts, tongues, faith, hope, or holiness. The greatest evidence of the presence of the Holy Spirit in us is love. There are three things that will endure: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. Love is how the world knows we're followers of Jesus. Love motivates us to minister to the least and the most difficult of these, and in doing so, to serve and love Jesus. Love inspires two great commandments that Jesus gave to us. Love agape, that is selfless, unconditional, and completely giving, is impossible without the help of the Holy Spirit. He pours God's love out of our hearts. For we know how dearly God loves us, because He has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with His love. When the Holy Spirit fills us with love, every fear, every worry flees. This is God 321. And now, here's your host, Danny Hutchins.
Hello, Detroit. Hello, Toledo. Hello, Front. Hello, Windsor. We're here today with Jeremy Hing. He is calling us from Costa Rica. It's just amazing technology. We are on the radio. We have last week it was Haiti, and now we're getting a phone call from a missionary from Costa Rica, Jeremy Hing. Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good. It's nice to talk to you. The last time I saw you in person, it was at Lapeer Community Christian Church, yes.
Correct.
Yeah, wow. And now you're in Costa Rica getting some language training?
Yes. Yep.
Well, and
the whole family's here.
The whole family's there.
Yep. The kids are with us during this training because we're going straight from San Jose to Quito, which is our destination for our work, the ministry.
Quito, Ecuador?
Yes.
Yes, wow. And your family, your wife is Teresa? And you have a 7-year-old Easton?
Yes, he just had a birthday while we were here. So
well, happy birthday.
Yep.
He's 8 now. Wow.
Yep.
What an adventure. And you have Haven, which is 4?
Yes. Oh, no, she's 5. She just turned 5 in February.
Well, I see.
Just before we left.
Well, time goes by. Now, you lived in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Is that right?
We did. My wife and I did before we started our family, and then when we started our family, we moved to North Branch, and at that time was probably we were in North Branch for about 7 years, and we attended Lapeer Community Church, where I met you for that time.
And then where you obviously you had your family, you were raising your family, and you guys were living in North Branch, and you had to, in order to commit to this ministry that you're going to in Ecuador, you had to sell everything and prepare and move down there, and then develop some means of support. Yes.
Yes, it was. It took a while. It's a long transition to make such an adjustment and commitment. Took us a couple of years, and in the last year, we sold pretty much everything during the summer, and we didn't make the move till winter. So we went without furniture. We were living out of suitcases for 6 months in North Branch, and then we got rid of the bigger things right at the last minute. It was interesting because we didn't have sellers lined up right away. And so right in the last month, people stepped up and there was a need for appliances and such. And they made those purchases at that time, but we didn't have it prearranged. So it's just really neat to see the Lord work on a timeline in His timing and just having to be, I think, faithful that things will work out. And trust in that because we really didn't know how it was going to work out.
Well, you're stepping right out there, and that's how God works. It's all in His time, and I'm learning myself. You have to take one step forward, but He goes in front of you, and it can't be in your timing. You can run ahead and all you want, but it's not going to work. Hey, you guys have a backstory though. You're a very young couple. How old are you?
I'm 35, and my wife is 33.
35 and 33, my goodness. Very young now. But this story goes back because you and your wife had volunteered for some previous programs. You're working with Extreme Response International, which is a humanitarian organization, right?
Correct. Yep, and they're in about 18 countries around the world, with ministries varying from dump dweller aid and medicine. We also have orphanages in Africa, AIDS orphanages. We have orphanages in South America as well. And then disaster relief and food and shelter, that sort of thing. Most of the ministries are working with, actually I should say all of the ministries work with local pastors native to the country that we have a presence in. And we work with the people that really there's no government aid or any other type of aid going on other than the benevolence and the sacrifice that the local ministries or pastors are making on their own. We come across several pastors in many of these countries that have churches and established communities, but they have a heart for a community or a situation where there is no help and no other church or government presence. So they try to get involved in those, and oftentimes we find that the pastors are using their own personal money, and they're working 2 or 3 jobs outside of their ministry to afford to develop new ministries in areas that people are unreached or unhelped.
Well, you're working like the first church. What's happened is you're going to the country, though, instead of going out and plowing new ground, you're going in, you have an association with a local minister who is part of the community, part of the surroundings. He is one of them, but he's reaching out and taking of himself, and you're partnering up with him as the first church. You're going out to touch people and sacrificing everything. Put yourself in the hands of God as he has.
Correct.
And you're going to assist. Now, Extreme Response was founded in 2001, and they provide shelter for those who have no homes in some communities. You also do school supplies and educational. You help to educate in many cases, whether it's speaking language or reading, writing, and then providing food for those who are hungry, and obviously to give a hug and love to those who don't have any or precious little. And then you provide life skills or job training for people too, so that they can make a life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, it starts off that way. Most of the ministries, they continue down that path as well. But we really find that through these ministries and through providing these services, these basic essentials and needs, that relationships develop. And through those relationships, oftentimes we have opportunities to share our faith in testimony and also be able to be in a position of discipleship with those that we're working with. And one of the most amazing things that I've seen since we've been going back and forth, we've been doing this part-time with Extreme Response, going back and forth to Ecuador for about 6 years.
6 years ago, so that puts you at 29, 28 years old
yes.
in that time.
Yeah.
So you would have had one child then.
Yeah, and my wife was pregnant with Haven at the time. In fact, one of the ministries we were going back and forth to consistently is called Remanso de Amor, which translates to Haven of Love, and she's actually named after that ministry because that's where our hearts became broke for the people in that community, and that is when we made the decision consciously as a family and started discussing the possibility of doing this full time and long term.
But Jeremy, does your wife, does your desire for the ministry or being a missionary go back beyond that? When your wife first touched, when the Spirit brought that concept to your head was it before you made your first trip, to help, or were you touched before?
It's interesting. The question is, for my wife and I, it's similar, and we've both had similar experience. Where before the trip, 6 or 7 years ago, it was in 2005. we both had an inkling that this is something that we would like to do. It's something that is very appealing to us. So deep down inside, we had already had an inclination towards mission work. We just really didn't know how to do it, how to get involved, how to get your feet wet. And I think we were still really trying to learn a lot of things just as a new family, starting off and as a new couple, being married. This will be our 9th year. We'll be having our anniversary here in Costa Rica, and so we really didn't know what we were doing, and it took some mentoring, and it took a lot of questioning and developing a relationship with Extreme Response that started in 2005. That we came to a place in about 2007, 2008, right there, where prior to that year, we were actually just catering to the idea as something in the future that we would retire into and make sure that, we built up a retirement and we could basically make this happen on our own, or get the kids out of the house and they're safe, and we don't want to bring the kids into a third world country and live there, and there's too many dangers, and so this is something we would want to do on our own later on in the future when the kids are all safe and settled in their own families and somewhere else, and so it wasn't until about 2007, 2008 that doors started opening in that direction, and doors started closing for me in terms of my vocation in Michigan, and we just started seeing that we were spending more time investing our services and skills and just our time, our love, into mission work and volunteer work with church and such, and we were enjoying that, and we were just it became a situation where we started to see the doors opening and saying, oh, no, not right now. This is something we wanted to do later after we've raised the kids and they were safely on their way to their own families. So as we started noticing this happening in our life, we started praying about it with some friends and some mentors, that maybe this is a transition that needs to happen now, and that we should be obedient to it rather than trying to make our own safe little plan.
Mm. Now, you and your wife, when you got married, how young were you when you got married?
We got married in 2001, so we were about 23.
23.
In that range.
Were you both Christians at the time? Did you?
Yes.
And you'd known each other for a little while?
Yeah, we got saved together about a year prior to our marriage. Well, maybe a little more than that. About a year and a half, close to 2 years prior to our marriage. We were dating up to that point for about 5 or 6 years, and we were both kind of searching for who we were in our early 20s, late teens, early 20s, and my wife, actually, to her credit, she's who started asking questions about Jesus Christ first, and she knew I was raised in the Lutheran school system and went to the Lutheran churches, and so she was asking me because she didn't know who else to ask, and so as I was answering her questions, I was overcome by a conviction through the Holy Spirit that I had known these things and hadn't been living this way.
Yes.
And so Teresa just jumped in. She just dove in head first into the gospel, and we started searching out a church. At the time, Lapeer Community Church wasn't operating yet, but we were invited to their premier service. And when we went there, it was too far away because we were still living in Sterling Heights at the time. They directed us to Kensington. And Kensington is, I think, their mentor church or plant church,
yes,
planting church.
Yeah.
And so we were attending Kensington and Troy there in Michigan for about a year and a half while we kind of got our situation together relationally with the Lord and then relationally with ourselves. We took a year for our engagement to continue to found our marriage on Christ and learn what it looks like to live for Christ, and then as a couple be founded on Christ.
Well, that was amazing. You actually went out. My understanding is you found Lapeer Church. You had that first, and then you guys took yourselves and got involved with them right in the beginning as one of the beginning part of the congregation. Yes.
Yeah, we weren't invited as part of that. I think the pastors, they have a story in a kind of like a startup team. We more or less came on the front end. They already had their team, and they were launching their church, and so I mean we've been there since the premier service, and we went back and forth from living in the city to moving there. It was about a 2-year transition before we became consistently weekly members or patrons, but as soon as before we actually moved to North Branch, we were coming out consistently at one point, so much so that we just went ahead and volunteered and got involved in whatever ministries where they had some holes. My wife got involved in the children's ministry and was heading up the nursery for a while, and I got involved with man-type things where we would do tear down because they were a portable church for quite some time, and we would do tear down and set up and things like that, and make sure all the things were put away properly and stored properly for the next service.
Yes, much like Kensington when they were opening an outlet or an extension of themselves in the beginning, moving equipment and music instruments and setting up on the weekend and putting everything back away. Now you guys, you said you knew each other before you got married for about 6 years, and then, but you dated. If I'm listening right, you dated her for quite a while. So you guys had an opportunity. You just didn't meet, get married. You have been working together in thought and process and communicating for quite a long time, for more than half of your lives, really. Pretty much.
At this point, yes.
Yeah, half your lives. So you know each other pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And then this decision, your wife moved out to it, and then you guys went on your first trip with Extreme Response. Was that to Ecuador or to Costa Rica, that first trip?
It was to Ecuador. The first trip was to Ecuador, and it was a trip that there was a couple. It's actually the parents of the founders of Extreme Response that live in Rochester, Michigan. Jerry and Joanne Carnell came from Kensington to introduce Lapeer Community Church to their first mission trip, essentially organized mission trip, and out of the country, and they. We clicked with them. We clicked with the staff members of Extreme Response, and that's really where the relationship started with Extreme Response. And from that point forward, we had just been going volunteer with them and really jumping into wherever we could. I have some vocational skills on the computer, and I've offered that volunteer time even when we're not in Ecuador doing anything hands-on. So that relationship just continued to grow, and because Jerry and Joanne lived in Rochester, where they still do now, we asked them if they would mind being kind of our mentors in life, and so we spent time meeting with them. We tried to meet at least once a month and have dinner or do something with them, and just live life and learn and grow together, and they were great mentors and still are. It's just now long distance to both Teresa and I, and we've seen some hard times with them, and they've really been there for us, and we've seen some really good times with them.
Now, Ecuador, that was your first trip, and
yes.
now it's become your commitment after your training in Costa Rica. So you and your wife formed an attachment in Ecuador. You told me a story about the people who live around the dump sites, around where people dump garbage.
Yeah, there's so many stories I could share with you, but there's actually two stories. There's one that is very personal for me that I experienced that really broke my heart. And then there's one for Teresa, very similar, at the exact same dump, the city dump in Quito. At the time in 2005, we were passing out food to the workers. Now, the people who live in the dump, they mine for recyclables, and they also mine for their own living. I mean, they'll find rotten food and they'll use it for themselves.
So they're literally digging around in garbage dumps, and these are open face garbage dumps. And they're not covered like the ones we have here. These are open face.
No, they are open face, and they're actually living in it. So they will set up little makeshift shacks and out of the things that they actually collect and find there, they'll use pallets for walls, pieces of board and this kind of thing, and tarps and whatever bags they can for, the cover for the top and that sort of thing. And then what they do is they dig around not only for their own food or their own things that they want to use, but they also look for plastics and metals, and they separate them, and then they take them to a recycling station where they can get
a little money,
pennies for the pound. And oftentimes they don't have an education, and they think very little of themselves. And the city workers that drive the bigger trucks and the tractor equipment don't really regard them much, and there's oftentimes they'll run them over, not necessarily maliciously, but they don't really look out for them, and it's kind of at your own risk that they live there.
But you also have rats there, and you have other predators, so this is an open sewer essentially, because when you have rainstorms, you're mixing all that garbage with water. Now, do they take the water from this area?
I have not seen them, because it's so black and murky. It literally looks like sewage. I have never witnessed an individual pick it up and use it in their mouth for drinking. But I don't really know if anybody has or if they do.
Well, where do they get their water from?
There are spigots sometimes near the stations where the actual city employees will park equipment or hose their machinery off and that sort of thing. Okay. Now, it's not filtered water. There's still bacteria and amoeboids and things like that. And oftentimes you see the young kids, they have rounded bellies, and so do the animals and that sort of thing. So you know that there's parasites and there's this type of thing going on. In my first encounter, as we were passing fruit out, was with a young boy about the age of my son at the time. In 2005, he would have been about 2.5. And this young boy's name was Michael. And he was sitting in the sewage and pushing an empty toner cartridge around with another empty toner cartridge, and he was making truck noises like children do when they're playing with their Tonka trucks or their cars, but he didn't have any of that. He was just pushing toner cartridges around doing this. So, I mean, quite literally, this is how they live. They, like I said, they find things that they want, and they will use it, and that's what they live with. And when I found this young boy, he was pushing two corner cartridges around as toys. And it just broke my heart, because I have a 2.5-year-old son back in the States at this time. And, I would buy him these little Tonka trucks and things, and it just broke my heart that I saw my own children in this way, in my mind, in my heart, and to see another child living this way, it just broke my heart as if he was my own.
Yes.
And so my wife has a very similar story where she was approaching a young girl and near the fence of this dump, and the young girl, she was trying to figure out what she was doing, because she kept going back and forth, and she was picking up plastic and taking it to a little covering that she had hidden in a corner, and she was putting it away to give to her parents. I don't know where her parents were, obviously for recycling, for living off of. And this young girl at the time was about 2 or 3, and this is now 2 or 3 years later after my experience. And Teresa had the same experience where it just broke her heart that a young girl the same age as our 2 or 3-year-old daughter is actually living in this dump, and instead of worrying about playing with her friends or doing something that she would enjoy, she's collecting trash to help her family survive.
Now, there obviously she's 2 or 3 years old, or 4 years old, but children are being born in this place. People are coming there, then conceiving their child in its place. Are these people coming from the city out of property, or has this become an inhabitants? The people are living there, so it's an inhabitants, and life occurs and goes on, and there's no schooling, you have some water, but this is life, collecting trash, and this is what they know.
Correct. This is generational. Oftentimes they have no education, so they don't think they can do anything more. They don't think that they're they have very low self-esteem, and there's a lot of different issues, emotional and spiritual issues, mental issues that we have to deal with working with people in this environment. They don't think very highly of themselves, and they have a lack of confidence. And the social status or the social structure is they actually cater to it. So if you're one of these miners or you live in the dumps, then people outside of this environment look down on these people, and they don't really give them a break or give them the foot in the door, if you will. And they often don't have an education or the confidence to even venture out of that. So it becomes a generational trap where the people that are there now are people who had parents that were living there and making a living out of there, and so on. We are finding sometimes that there are people that don't live there, that live in impoverished areas of the city, and they come there to do their work, and they will keep a makeshift shack and do shifts with other family members. So there is a rest shack there as well. So there's, but that's probably not as frequent as those that are actually living there.
Yeah, the culture grows. Now that was you and your wife's first impression. This was your first trip, your first impression, and obviously that touched your heart. But then you made more and more trips. Were they back to Ecuador, or did you go to other areas, or did you come back?
We made more and more back to Ecuador because I believe that we really felt the calling from those first experiences to that specific location. And that isn't to say that we won't visit the other ministries with Extreme Response. We've shared stories with other staff members. We know what's going on in the other ministries. We've seen pictures. We spent time with the marketing material, and we're keen on what's going on within the organization and their presence around the world. But we felt the calling specifically to this location. So that's the direction that we moved as we built our relationship with Extreme.
Well, as that calling got stronger and stronger, then you both moved to a place where you said, we need to commit. And then, so there had to be a lot of conversation around you leaving your life where where you have everything, maybe not everything quite the way you want, but in the standard to where you're going, you have food, you have shelter, you have a job, you have heat, your life, you have friends, you get to go out to eat occasionally, you have a good life, yes?
Yes. I would say that we didn't have so much conversation between ourselves in terms of us having to become comfortable with our commitment as adults. I think where we had our concerns and where we really had to learn to let go and trust in God was with our children. Now, once again, back to our original safety plan is we would do this in an older age, and we're comfortable with putting ourselves at risk, but not our children. And so we had to have a conversation about that with the kids actually, and explain to them, what the risks are, and that we felt that the Lord is actually calling mommy and daddy now and not later, and that this is an opportunity for you to be a part of the ministry and be a part of these people's lives and make a difference. And essentially, you would also be employed by God in this way. And so we had to have a lot of conversations with the kids about what this looks like and what kind of sacrifice that would be for them. I think Teresa and I were very well aware of the sacrifice. We just didn't want to put our kids through that. We were fine with putting ourselves through that.
But when you look at your kids through that, when you got touched for that, you had one, your wife was pregnant with the other, so you've actually been having this conversation in some degree since the kids could have a response. So you've been talking to them and actually grooming them or for all of their life so far.
Yes, many years. I think that if you were to ask them right now, I don't think they'll have a memory where they weren't preparing and praying with us to work for the Lord in Ecuador, and what it looks like to make the sacrifices and still be engaged in your responsibilities and things that you have to do in Michigan.
Yeah.
So because there were several times when my son got old enough where he really wanted to know, what's the point of school in Michigan if I've got to change school several more times from here. Continuing your responsibilities, continuing your commitment to the Lord, and you don't let those things go away. I mean, at near the end, the last couple of months, we did have to step back from some things we were involved with at LCC because it's just too much when you really have your feet out the door and you're in transition.
Yes, and you have to do all the things and all the planning that has to go. Now, you're going to have you'll have a house or a place to live, and you in the town. So are you going to live close to the dump site? You're going out to the dump site. You're going to live in the town because you're going to have a place for your children, and you're having education because your children need to learn to speak the language, or they may already know because you've been practicing over time for that. But you're going to create a life down here. What's that going to look like? What's it beginning to look like now?
It's beginning to look like, and this is very uncommon, and in missionaries for their first arrival to a country destination, we already have a place secured that we'll be renting, and usually it takes time to find a place. And we got fortunate because there's a missionary family that's actually leaving right about now, and we're showing up in a couple months that are going back to Canada, and they're done serving their time in Ecuador. And so when their place opened up, we heard of it, and we made connection through some other staff members at Extreme Response, and they took care of securing deposits and transferring the utilities over. And this location is actually in the capital of Ecuador, in Quito. And there's ministries all throughout Ecuador from Extreme Response, and we'll just have to travel to those as we as the need.
Now this house was a miracle for you. There was kind of a lot of little catchy things that helped you get that. I mean, this house. You had a story that you told me about the house because you're concerned about housing, and then this house came up. How did that happen?
Yeah, this is interesting because, like I said, it's not common that missionaries have their house prearranged before they show up in the field. And for whatever reason, I mean, even though we were aware of these things, we were still a little uneasy about the move and trying to help the children and ourselves be at ease with the transition, and knowing that there was going to be a holding pattern in Costa Rica during language school. And so we were just looking for some assurances from the Lord, and we were praying about it because we're like, okay, there's so many things that are in flux and that we don't know the ending to, and we don't know how this is going to turn out. But Lord, give us some peace right now. We just, at this point in time, it was about 3 or 4 months away from our departure to Costa Rica, and we were just like, we just need some peace on one thing. If you could, please give us some peace on our housing and let us know it's going to be okay. And we didn't really say give us a house and let it be this one or let it be that one. We just were asking for some peace on one thing, and it would be really great if that was the one that we could have some peace about. And within 24 hours, I think it was the very next day after we were praying about this, we had an email in our email box, and it was from a staff member from Extreme Response that were friends with the missionaries leaving another organization. They showed us the pictures and everything. There were several pictures. It has a yard that the kids can play in. And what's really interesting about that as well is that we were worried about the children coming from a 2.5-acre home in North Branch, Michigan, to concrete in the capital of Ecuador. Because in the capital, in the city, there isn't much to speak of any yards. Most houses, in fact, don't have any. They just have a concrete patio, and it's usually maybe in the size of about 4 foot by 5 foot, and then a spot for a car, and that's it. And it's a gated. Everything's gated. Barbed wire, glass, shards and that sort of thing. And so we were really worried about their adjustment to this. And so that's why we were really praying about that in particular, if we could have some peace about that. And it actually comes with a yard all the way around the house. Mm-hmm. It's not much. It's maybe a 4-foot wide strip, that goes all the way around the house. And but when you're moving from 2.5 acres with these young children to a city of concrete, that was a huge miracle and a huge blessing, and it just gave us peace about that yes. Particular item. It was an answer to a prayer, and we just, from that point on, my wife made a commitment never to ask the Lord what's going to happen next anymore.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because we were, at that point, we were asking what's going to happen next at least once or twice a month. Because everything is up in the air, you're really putting yourself in limbo in a lot of ways when you make a transition like this.
Well, sure, you're leaving your employment. You may have had some savings, but the next part coming, you have to work with Extreme Response and the peer community and your neighbors and friends. You've got to structure a way to have an income and have some of these things paid for. And how did that all go together?
Well, and that's where you're really a lot in limbo, in really wondering what's going to happen next. Is mostly due to the fact that when you become a missionary, you are paid by support because your organization doesn't make an income. There's no capital. What you have to do is raise support through churches that are willing to support your cause or your ministry, individuals, families, businesses, and so a lot of your timing and your planning is contingent on your support levels and what percentage you are at, and that determines the phase you are in and what things you can start planning next. And so we went from there in the last 6 months, we went from about 30% to 60% within a month, and then we kind of plateaued at 60% for about 3 or 4 months. Then we thought, well, let's take a moment and go to Colorado for some pre-field training for about a month, and then come back and continue race support, see where that. From the point in time that we returned home from Colorado in our pre-field training, which was about 2 months prior to our departure to Costa Rica, and we still were stagnant at about 60-something%.
Let's talk about dollars. What does 60% mean in dollars?
60% in dollars is about, well, we need $3,200 a month to sustain the ministry. So we were right around $1,800 or $1,700, and we came back with that from Colorado, and we were really concerned that we were going to have to postpone our plans to come to Costa Rica in April because we just didn't have the right support levels. And so within 24 hours of our return, and we were spending a lot of time just being jet lagged and catching up with Michigan when we got back. We got back over a weekend. But before Saturday afternoon hit, we had several emails flood in and several phone calls that occurred, and we went from 60 to 93% in 24 hours.
Well, amazing. That's just amazing. And in dollars, your total support in round numbers, you're looking at it's going to take about $40,000 to support you for the year.
Yes, and that not only supports our family and daily living, that's not just our income, but there's a percentage of that, I think, if I remember right from my report that I looked at last, is about 10 to 12% that's project funding and materials for the things that we'll need inside the ministries when we
right.
are doing specific things and doing specific.
So you that's all pre-thought. So you try to pre-plan. They help you pre-think. This is what your project support looks like for the first year. This is what your living looks like for the first year.
Health insurance, we have to pay for that as well before we pay our income. For the family. And then there's things like furlough funding, so we can come back to the United States every 2 years, hopefully, Lord willing, and that the funds are available. So there's a percentage that our organization requires us to put aside before we. So everything gets taken care of before we even get our paycheck for the month.
Wow.
And so if we're short if we're down in our support, then our actual living expenses is what is going to be shorted.
Now the money goes into extreme response. All the money goes into there. Then the money is given back to you as weekly payments.
Monthly.
Monthly payments.
So yeah, all donations go to Extreme Response, and we have an account. All the staff members have an account number, so that you don't put a name on a check, you put a number on a check, and it gets allocated to our funding.
Well, while we're talking about that, let's talk about that. Let's talk to the audience about your funding right now. Where are you at in that funding? And let's put out your number and tell people where they can go, because this is a good time to do that, where they can go to help you.
Thank you. We are still we're at 74%. No, that's not right. 94%. So we've moved from 93 to 94 since we've left. We haven't really had a lot of opportunity or time to continue to raise that last 8% because we're really involved in our training right now. So we still have about 8% to go, which looks like $240
a month.
A month, yep. And so right now that would short our living expenses, but we're doing okay here in Costa Rica. We've cut back a lot of things that we normally we will have normally in Ecuador for daily living, but we're doing bare minimum here as we can because it's temporary. So $240 a month is what we're short, and our account number with Extreme Response is 117. 117.
Your account number is 117.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for your family. That's for your mission. 117 with Extreme Response. And is that Extreme Response? What is the website for them? ExtremeResponse.net or .org?
.org. ExtremeResponse.org. And there's a memo line so that if you go through the organization's website, they have a memo line for allocation of the giving. Otherwise, all money that goes in that's not allocated to a staff family or a ministry location, they use in the general fund how they see fit, which is a good thing as well.
The other part, though, when they go in there, if they have more questions about Ecuador, and would they look on, can they see not your particular, but can they see the broader mission that you're going to go on? Is there something on Extreme Response for that broader mission?
Yeah, on Extreme Response's website, they have pages for the different ministries in different countries. In some countries, they have several ministries. Ecuador is one of them. And if you clicked on the Ecuador page, you would see a listing of the ministries and what their function is, purpose, and location. And if you clicked on one of those links, you would actually see detailed information about that particular ministry. And that's a really good area to just see what they're doing all around the world. And you can just click in any country or any ministry name and see what's going on. But in terms of the staff members themselves, there's no staff member information on Extreme Response's website. Some of that's to protect identities and things like that. But also I think that's just part of their way of doing things on their public.
Are you going to have additional staff going with you, or is it just your family?
There are 2 families that are living there already that are already set up full time, and they're waiting for our arrival because they're overwhelmed right now. And right now is the season they're starting to do a bulk of their. They bring teams in, short-term mission teams from other churches all around the world, and so they're short-staffed, but they're making it happen. The Lord is sustaining them and keeping the ministry growing, and they're really excited to have us there in the next couple of months.
Jeremy, do you have a term which you and your family, did you decide to go for 4 years or 6 years, or you're going to let God decide that, or you have a predetermined time period?
We're going indefinitely as a career decision, and we've discussed that with Extreme Response. So basically, it's our agreement with Extreme Response that we're here for the long haul until God sees otherwise. And maybe it's actually until God says maybe you need to go to this country instead now. And it could be with Extreme Response still or with another organization. We don't know. Only the Lord knows that, but our commitment is for the long haul, indefinitely. And we have our own blog where we've shared a video from YouTube of our testimony, a lot of the things that I've shared with you. And it also has a link to that's already pre-designated to our account number.
Well, how do people find your blog?
Our blog is extremehing.org.
Extreme Hing, H-I-N-G,
yep.
Hing?
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's pretty clever. Extreme Hing.
H-I-N-G, yep, .org.
.org.
And from the homepage of extremehing.org, there's a paragraph near the bottom that says "Calling to Ecuador," and it has a little red "Learn More" button, and that's where we have our YouTube video posted of Teresa. You will actually be able to hear Teresa's testimony and take on a lot of what I've already shared with you today. But it's about a 4.5-minute clip that we had a videographer put together for us, and it really puts it in perspective and brings the whole story together in a short period of time.
Well, say that again. Is Extreme Hing is it Extreme Hing Response?
It's extremehing.org. extremehing.org.
Okay.
And then there's a donate link where that, like I said, that's already set up to go to our account number to Extreme Response, so you don't have to remember to put it in a memo line if you use that link.
Now, on your blog, you're going to continue on, so you're going to tell your story so those people who donate or want to follow your adventure, you're going to run that so that they can be part of your life.
Yep, there's a blog button there as well on the homepage, and that takes you to we've been doing monthly update that we send out once a month, approximately, give or take. But once a month, we try to get some pictures up there of what's going on and where we're at with things and how things are going, and we share praises. Oftentimes, we'll share praises and things that the Lord's doing through relationships and through some of the people that we know are the audience, which is.
And you'll be telling them some of the stories of the families at the dump site, I'm sure, and about their life that will touch people's hearts.
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, Jeremy, is the government supported of this activity? Do you get government support, or they just watch, or are they helping Extreme Response? Are they real receptive?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. They are with Extreme Response, and in Ecuador, there's a huge mission presence in the capital, especially from out of Quito. And one of the things, and I don't know if maybe your listeners may have had this question roaming around in their minds as we're talking, but Extreme Response is classified as a humanitarian aid organization.
Yes. Well, we've got to go. I'm sorry, we've run out of time, and that's Jeremy Hing from Ecuador. He's in Costa Rica learning, and we are God321, and you can find us at God321.net, and you can get this program tomorrow, and you're going to hear this again tonight for the first time between 11 and 12 o'clock. We're on again. So we are out of here. We're going to talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to God 321 with Dan Hutchins. God 321 is sponsored by Dihydro Services, Inc. To learn more about the person of the Holy Spirit, visit God321.net. That's God321.net. Or call 586-978-0541. That's 586-978-0541.